Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to show how to make nice wireframe renders with Arnold in Maya. So as a modeler, you might just have finished up a model and you want to get some nice images from it for your portfolio, for example. So here I have a model and I want to get some nice images out of it. So the most basic thing that you could do, I guess, is to just take a screenshot from the Maya viewport and put that in your portfolio. It's not super slick, so you might want to do at least a basic setup for like a renderer like Arnold and render images with that renderer. So that's what I did here. So I have my model. I added some basic lights, a sky dome and two area lights. And let's see how that looks. So let's use the Arnold renderer in the viewport. And there we go. So, like as you can see, this looks nicer than, just like a screenshot from the Maya viewport. Yeah. It does your model more justice. But as you can see, like it doesn't show the wireframe. So like a clay render like this is nice, but as a modeler, you at least also want like a different version that does show the wireframe. Because the wireframe, that's what you worked with as a modeler. So, you could say like, oh, like I enable the Arnold renderer in the viewport and I select the model, then the Arnold or the Maya viewport will overlay the wireframe on top of my renderer, take a screenshot of this and call it a day. Yeah, that's also, you could do it, but it's again not very nice. Like as you can see, like the wireframe breaks up a little bit here. And also if you're going to do a turntable, this is not really working. So what should we do then? Okay, like first of all, let's just stay in Arnold. Let's not rely on, taking screenshots of the Maya viewport. Let's see what options Arnold has. So if we select a model and instead of our material that we have assigned now, which is just like a standard Arnold shader, let's create a new material. Then check Arnold shader, and we want to render a wireframe. So like there's Arnold wireframe shader here. So that sounds like what we need. We assign it, and like as you can see, it's not really what we want. First of all, it renders like every edge. So we see triangles here and it's very noisy. So that's actually very easily fixed. So if you go to the material settings, and here with edge type we see triangles, set it to polygons, and then like we don't see the triangles anymore, but still it renders like the wireframe of the smoothed mesh, not the mesh that we worked with directly, but the mesh after smoothing. And that's typically not what we want. We would like to show the topology that we actually worked with, not the topology how it is after it's being subdivided. So what can we do? Let's check the wireframe material options. So we went from triangles to polygons, maybe patches. No, that also doesn't fix our problem. We still have the same result. Then, yeah, color, that's not gonna fix it. Line width, like, yeah, we can make the line a bit more thicker, clear, or more elegant than thin, but again, it doesn't really fix our problem. And, like, that's basically the options to tweak for this wireframe material. So what can we do? You could say like, oh, let's take the model, put it in unsmoothed mode, take the wireframe of this. But first of all, like this, it doesn't look nice. You do want to have a smooth mesh, but this looks very angular. You could say like, okay, I render the smooth mesh without wireframe, then I render this unsmoothed wireframe and put it on top. And you could do that, but it's not that nice. It's not the most pretty solution. So the solution is not using the Arnold wireframe material. So instead, you can use the Arnold utility shader in combination with the Arnold Toon shader. So let's do that. Let's open up Hypershade and let's create a utility shader. And assign that to our light. And then there's a few options for this utility shader, but basically what you want is to set shade mode to LED and then color mode to uniform ID. Go. Okay. So what we see now is that the utility material assigns a different color to each individual face. Okay, that's nice and all, but how does that help us? Okay, maybe it's then good to show that what happens when we use Smooth Preview Maya. So let's enable it for our model, and now enable Smooth Preview. When we do that, you can see like there's a color assigned to each face after it has been smoothed. So even though in our unsmoothed mesh, this was one face, still like after smoothing, it's not taken into account, and each face just gets a different color, even though like in the unsmoothed version it was the same face. But if we don't use Smooth Preview, disable it again, we can actually use Arnold's subdivision instead to smooth our model. So let's see how that works. That's just gonna select one object of my model now. And then if I go in the attribute editor in the shape node, pull out the Arnold tab, scroll down a little bit, and then we can see here there's like a subdivision section. So currently the subdivision is set to none. So, but we can set it to cat mock Clark. And now you can see in our render that the mesh is smoothed and the smoothed faces keep the same color. So this is very interesting. So now we have a smooth mesh, and even though like the underlying subdivision created more faces, like the faces still maintain like the same uniform ID in the Arnold utility material. So what we can do now is to take the next step in Hypershade and create the Toon material. So AI Toon, let's call, because this is going to be our final material, let's call this AI page. Smoothing group, right. Then what we want to do is to zoom in a little bit to be clear. Is take the out color of our utility material and wire it into our new Toon material. Then select here other, and from the list pick mask color. So okay, so that's now wired into our new Toon materials, and let's assign that to our model. So now we have our Toon material assigned to our model. So right now we don't any wireframe. We don't even see like an outline what you might expect from the Toon material. So to fix this, we have to go into our render settings, go into Arnold's renderer, go into filter, and select contour here. There we go. And there we have it. So now we have a smooth cage. So it's still a little bit angular here. So let's change the iterations to 2. And there we go. So we have a smooth wireframe rendered in Arnold. As you can see, it's now only applied to this object and not to this one. So, or the material is applied, but the Arnold subdivision is not applied to the other objects, only to this object here. So instead of selecting each object one by one, let's go into the attribute spreadsheet, and then in the Arnold tab, you can see here subdivision type for one object is already set to cat Clark, and to 2 subdivisions, and now set it to for each object. So cat Clark, and here set this to 2, and there you have it. So now each object is smoothed by Arnold, not by the Maya smooth preview, and in our render we get a nice Toon material which creates this nice smoothed cage. So this is nice enough. So this is, just what you've been looking for, and you could call it a day. But let's check a little caveat here though. So in Maya, we have disabled the smooth preview. So let's stop the Arnold renderer for a bit, and we can see this is like the unsmoothed mesh. But you actually might want to, like have it smoothed, because basically that's the model that you actually want to create, like so you might want to work with this. But if we do enable the Maya smooth preview again, then render to Arnold, then again, we end up with a too dense, with a wireframe that's too dense. That's not what we want. So yeah, that's a little bit annoying. You don't want to like keep track of like, okay, like the status of your smooth preview, for your render. You go back and forth. It can get a bit confusing and messy at that point. So is there a way, to make it a bit more streamlined? Like if you want to create a new wireframe render, instead of like turning off smooth preview, then setting up the Arnold smoothing, how can we do that more efficiently? So extra bonus point. So I mean, if you're fine with just turning up smooth preview off for your one render, then sure, that's totally fine. But let's say, like you're tweaking your model still a little bit, or like you're doing something with your render setup, with your lights or your turntable, that has some tweaking, and you don't want to go back and forth between, like disabling the smooth preview, enabling it, assigning the Toon material, and then, like, oh wait, I want to put my let's say you textured it, put that material back, like going back and forth, and that is can be a bit of a hassle. So there's actually an option for that, and we're gonna use like render layers for that. Might not be the best solution, or actually, I think it's pretty good. I'm just not a render layer expert, so I might totally abuse it or use it in the wrong way, but it might work for you as well, so I'm just sharing it. So this is what I like to do, is to go into render setup, create a new layer. So I have now a render layer. And I want to include, I'm only interested in whatever setup I create here into applying that to my model. If I have like some other objects around, like my backgrounds, whatever, I do not want to overwrite anything for that. So I'm just gonna put here, selection, and I'm gonna do the material override. Material override is gonna be I named it smooth gauge. It has to be smoothing group. Let's do that. So let's pretend I did not apply my smooth gauge material to my object. It still has its original material. So that this is basically like how the model started out. But like now with this render setup, let's wireframe override. Basically, now if I enable this render layer, boom, tada, it overrides the material for my model. And like if I want to see the original materials again, I just turn this layer off, and there we go. However, let's disable Arnold again. Like still the model here in my scene is still in unsmoothed preview. So typically I don't want to really need to think about this. I just want this to be able to be smoothed as well. Like that's how I like to work. But then again, if I enable my material override with a wireframe, I see like, smooth previews on, so Arnold's gonna render the wires of the smoothed mesh before subdividing it itself. And that's not really what I want. So we can fix that as well. Let's do that by creating a sub collection. So we create a collection in a collection. Call this model. Okay. So instead of using transform as filter, we're gonna use shapes. And basically include everything. And then we're gonna create some absolute overrides. The first override is gonna be like do this disable the Maya smoothing. So override mode preview. Right. So I just happen to know what this attribute is called. So that use smooth preview for render. And you can see by default it's on. That means when sending it to the render, it sends a smooth preview. That's not what we want. So disable that. Okay, now we see that we disabled it, but it still seems to be smoothed. Okay, let's see why that is. This setting is in the attribute editor here on the smooth mesh, then subdivision levels. So here you can see it's orange, that means it's been overridden. You can see like, okay, we disabled use preview level for rendering, but then it uses this subdivision instead. So this is also subdividing. Basically, we want to set this to 0. So, I mean, I could set it to 0 here, but you know, we want to stick with our render setup to handle that. So what we do then is create another absolute override. Let's call this more preview levels, or yeah, it's not entirely correct, but let's leave it at that. And then we can actually just drag this here, middle mouse button, render smooth level, and set that to 0. And there we have it. So that fixes that. Before I set with the attributes editor or spreadsheet, I set the Arnold subdivisions to 2 and to use cat Clark instead of none. So that's what I did early in the video, but you know, if you go straight into this render setup, you have not done that, you know. And then this would still be at none, and this would be at, yeah, it's not used, doesn't really matter, but will be at 0. So this is, you know, like if you would go straight into the setup, like how it could look. Then you can see like, okay, the model is rendered, you know, like unsmoothed. Again, you can just fix this by adding an override, and then I happen to know the names of these because I just went into it a bit back and forth. So Arnold subdiv type, div type. Okay, by default it's none. We override it with a render setup to cat Clark. And then the last override is going to be AI sub div iterations, right? 0. 1 is nice, 2 is nicer. I don't think we have to go beyond that. So there you have it. Now we have a nice render setup. So if you disable it, you get the object, you know, looking how it was created. If we enable this layer, then we can render our object like in a nice smoothed wireframe without manually, you know, tweaking anything on the model itself. So that's like a nice way to approach things. One thing though that I realized here is that I need to background is now not rendering. Now we can fix that. By creating another collection. Because without that collection, the things not fitting in our wireframe collection or our model collection are gonna be left out. Other there we go. And yeah, that's it. So nice wireframe, smooth it in Arnold, render turntable of this, and yeah, that's it. Thank you.